Thank you so much for joining me. I'm Drew Geraci. We're gonna have a great time. In this first chapter, I'm gonna discuss time-lapse at its core. We'll go through the different types of uses it has, how it can be implemented, and the types of subjects you can shoot, and the intervals that are best suited for those setups. So let's just jump right into it. I think one of the first questions I always hear is, why would anyone ever want to shoot time-lapse, and what's it actually used for? For me, time-lapse started off as a hobby. It was something that I could tinker around with. I could do a lot of trial and error, and a lot of the times I failed at what I was doing. And for me, time-lapse is one of those things that once you start getting into it, you really have to get into it because there's a lot of time that's involved in it. And it's not the easiest thing to do to start off, but the way that technology has evolved over the last couple of years, it has become so much more easier to manipulate and to manage and to really produce high quality content. For me too, time-lapse is a passion. It's something that I really fell in love with. Being able to go out there, whether it's on a cityscape or grand landscape vistas out in the middle of the desert, being able to capture things that you don't normally see in the real world or just with a standard photograph is something that really drew me to time-lapse photography. And I think for a lot of people too, if you're on the cusp of, whether you're wanting to go into photography or wanting to do video, time-lapse is that perfect middle ground where you can actually marry photography and videography together and you create something that's truly beautiful. And it can also be a very therapeutic event. A lot of the times when you're going out, you can go out by yourself or with friends and family. But for me, I usually go out by myself, and I usually go out to these different types of landscapes, and I can sit out there, contemplate, and reflect while I'm actually shooting a time-lapse. So a lot of the time, if you're in a situation that's very stressful, time-lapse can be a lot less stressful because it really allows you to really see the scene, capture the images that you want to capture, and then come back with a product that's really awe-inspiring. When it comes to the commercial world of things, time-lapse is used everywhere. TV, film, advertising, you name it, time-lapse is there. Back in the day when I first started doing time-lapse, it was kind of a very niche subject. Not a lot of people were doing it. It was very difficult to actually produce, but now again, it's very simple and very easy. But it can be used for a plethora of things. For TV and film, it can be used for transitional pieces, showcasing a movement from day into night, or showcasing someone's life going crazy. I'm drawn back to one of my favorite movies, Requiem for a Dream, and in that sequence, there is a mother that's basically on speed, and they speed it up using time-lapse, and it goes through her entire day in a few seconds. But now a lot of television shows like House of Cards, or even films like West Side Story, are using it in a more mainstream way. And I think that's kind of why I'm really drawn to it, is because it has so many different applications when it comes to the commercial world, which is why hopefully you're here so you can not only learn something new, you can turn it into something that's very profitable for yourself. One of the greatest selling points to time-lapse is just how licensable it is. If you're looking to create or generate extra income, selling time-lapses is a great way to do that because a lot of manufacturers, a lot of companies, and a lot of advertisers use it daily, constantly, honestly, for a lot of different things. So if you're out there shooting, you're creating content, you can take that content, sell it back to people, and this is how you basically make a living shooting time-lapse. Now, there is one thing though that I will say that a lot of people going into this maybe don't recognize or won't know, is that time-lapse requires a lot of disk space and a lot of computer power. And when I first started doing this, I learned this the hard way because you think you buy maybe a 4 or a 6 terabyte hard drive and that'll set you for a while, but once you start doing this, you get into higher resolutions like 8K, 12K and beyond, you're going to be using terabytes upon terabytes of space. So it's really important going into this knowing how much you're going to need horsepower-wise for your computer, and also how much disk storage space you're going to need. So I would recommend, if you are starting to just get into time-lapse, you're not going to need too much. I would recommend anywhere between a 6 to 8 terabyte hard drive if you really want to get into it. And then if you really want to take it to the next level and make it an actual career, you're probably going to want at least 64 to 120 terabytes just so that you can have the space to grow, because once you start compiling all these images together, the space is just going to explode. So now you know why someone would want to shoot time-lapse and how it's used. We'll now discuss the different types of elements that you can time-lapse that will offer the best results. To start off, clouds are probably the easiest thing to time-lapse because they're so abundant and they're pretty much anywhere you go. Whether you're in a cityscape or a landscape setting, you're going to have the ability to shoot clouds, and really they're just really magical and fun to do. You can have them in different types of environments. You could be out in the desert shooting them, you could be out in the Arctic shooting them, you could be out in the tropics shooting them. Clouds are everywhere around us and they're very beautiful. And honestly, they're probably one of the most sought out thing for stock video. So if you're thinking about getting into stock video, shooting clouds is probably the best way to go. There are so many varieties of clouds that you can shoot too, whether it's from storm clouds if you want to go out on the open prairie, or you want to see nice puffy white clouds on an open city vista. There's so many things to choose from that clouds are probably the easiest and the best thing to shoot when it comes to time lapse. The next easiest thing to shoot is people or cars. They're pretty much everywhere around us, and even now that with the pandemic being over, we can go back into the cities now and find a ton of foot traffic as well as car traffic, and they're really fun to film. And when you're talking about shooting at night, the cityscapes you get with the cars and the people can really create beautiful and magical scenes. A lot of the time you can create really cinematic scenes because you're dragging the shutter, which is going to allow you to create light streaks from those cars. And when we get down to talking about the intervals and shutter speed and all that fun stuff, you'll see how those correlate together and how you can create something that's truly wondrous to watch. Shadows are probably one of the most difficult things to film, basically because there's just so much time between the intervals that you're shooting. The sun moves very slowly in the summer and very quickly in the winter. So if you are wanting to shoot shadows, shadows are probably best shot in the wintertime because of the shorter duration. And when we start talking about the intervals, you'll see just the difference between those two. But shadows really offer a lot in the way of storytelling. And when I was shooting for Steven Spielberg on West Side Story, we used shadows as the main component to kind of showcase how you're transitioning from one life to another. And you know, the setting sun or the sun rising and those shadows cascading across the landscape, it's really beautiful to watch, and it really can tell a very mesmerizing and powerful story. The next thing we want to talk about are events. Events are great for showing the beginning, middle, and end of something. It's like more like a progression of time, and it could take anywhere from an hour to a year to do. On projects that I've worked for in the past, I've spent anywhere from 1 year to 2 years using long-term photography to be able to capture the growth of an apple, to be able to capture the building of architecture. And these are the things that really you have to go into thinking about, you know, well, how much time am I going to need to shoot this? What is my interval going to be for that? And where exactly do I want the camera to end? So there's a lot that goes into shooting events. Obviously, shorter timed events, if they're just an hour or a couple hours, these are more about showing the progression of the buildup, whether that's through the people or the architecture. But these are really fun and can make for really great social media posts. One of my favorite things to shoot is astro time-lapse photography because it's great for showing new landscapes and new lights, and it's very awe-inspiring. The first time you get to see the Milky Way as it cascades and glides across the horizon, it's probably one of the most liberating feelings I've ever felt because you feel so small and insignificant, and just right there in the back of your screen you can see just how beautiful the Milky Way is as it's either rising or setting on the horizon. And it's really one of those things that's very, very easy to do, but at the same time, there's some technical challenges. And we'll discuss what kind of intervals you want to use when it comes to shooting astrophotography and just the best ways to implement it so that you get the most smoothest transition when you're creating the movement of the Milky Way. When we talk about the hardest thing to time-lapse, that would be plants. Plants are probably the most difficult to time-lapse just because there's so much planning and so much understanding of how the plant is going to move, where it's going to end up, and there's a lot of unforeseen variables because plants basically could grow and do anything at any point. You really have to make sure that you have all of your things set up in accordance and that you've done your research. One thing with shooting plants is you have to anticipate just how long it's going to shoot. And you could be shooting anywhere from 20 days to 150 days to even 300 days, depending on what it is you want to capture inside that plant's life cycle. You also have to think about lighting, watering, and all of the other things that are going to affect the end scene. So when it comes to plant time-lapse photography, that's definitely the most difficult to shoot, and quite honestly is a niche within itself. Now, the last thing you can do for time-lapsing is adding motion. And through this, you'd be using a motion control device, something like a 3-axis or a 5-axis slider with a pan tilt head. And what this is going to do is it's going to amplify the motion in the scene and really take your time-lapse to another level, because not only will you be seeing advancements in your scene, whether that's a day to night or you want to showcase just a beautiful vista scene, adding that perspective motion into the scene really just kicks it up to a level that's more cinematic and much more robust to watch. And if you want to wait for part two will discuss exactly how to use motion control devices and make it so that you can become a pro at using them in the field. Now that we've discussed the types of things that we can shoot, we need to discuss the interval, because the interval is the most important thing when it comes to time-lapse. So what is an interval? The interval is the most important aspect to time-lapse because it basically dictates when the camera is going to fire and for how long and for the duration of time. So when we choose our intervals, we really want to make sure that we're matching our intervals and our shutter speed to the same frequency. For instance, if our interval is 2 seconds, we really want to make sure our shutter speed is closer to that interval. That could be 1.2 seconds, 1.6 seconds, 1.8. It really depends on what your camera is capable of doing. But the closer that we are to that interval with our shutter speed, the better, more smoother results we're going to get when it comes to post-production. The interval dictates how slowly or quickly the camera will take photos. The longer the interval, the longer the total shoot time will be. The shorter the intervals, the shorter the shoot time will be. So really going into this, a 1 or 2 second interval could be great for a very nice short 15-minute, 20-minute time lapse. But if you want to go even longer than that, you could do a 4 to 5 second interval, and that could take you an hour or maybe even 2 hours to produce. So the interval is really key to creating our time lapses and creating a cinematic time lapse. So let's discuss how interval interacts with the elements. When it comes to clouds, you really want to be shooting anywhere from 1 to 2 seconds usually for fast clouds, and if they're moving slow, anywhere from 2 to 4 seconds. Now, this is all based also on your focal length. The wider lens that you're using, you're going to probably have a much faster interval, and the tighter lens you're using will probably have a slower interval. If you're trying to capture clouds that are in a great distance away from you and you're shooting at, let's say, 200 millimeters, you're probably going to have an interval of anywhere from 3 to 4 seconds. When it comes to fog, though, you really want to use the fastest interval that you have, 1 second or even faster. If you can find an intervalometer that does half a second, that's what I would recommend, and that's what's going to create that nice buttery smooth, almost water-like effect when it comes to fog. Moving on to people or cars, you really don't want to blur people too much, and you really want to make sure people's actions are taken quickly. So 1 second is probably your slowest that you want to go. Again, if you have the ability to do a half-second interval, that's what I would really suggest. And when it comes to cars, and this again just varies on what you are shooting, a 2 to 3 second interval is great, especially at night, because that's what's going to create those nice long light streaks and give you a much more dynamic shot. If you are shooting in the daytime, though, a 1 to 2 second interval is great with a, let's say, a 1 to 2 second shutter speed, and that's going to give you a really beautiful cinematic feel as well. And in the next chapter, we'll discuss how shutter speed actually relates to that interval and just how pivotal it is to creating those cinematic shots. For shadows in the summer, you're looking anywhere from 15 to 20 seconds. And if you're looking to create a very large movement utilizing that interval, you're probably going to be looking anywhere from 4 to 6 hours minimum just to see any kind of change in movement in your shot. Now, that's why it's always best, I feel like, to film shadows in the winter, because you'll be anywhere from 8 to 10 seconds on the interval, which is much faster, and probably in a range of 2 to 4 hours, you can get a really beautiful shot, especially if you're starting very early in the morning. You can get that nice golden sunrise as it comes up. The shadows will cascade across the side of the building or whatever your subject is, and that's going to be the best time to shoot. When it comes to those shadows, though, I would really highly recommend not shooting midday, because obviously the sun is going to be directly above you, and it's going to prevent you from really seeing any kind of movement or motion in the time-lapse shot, because the sun's already at its peak. And that's going to really reduce the amount of movement that you see from those shadows. But at the beginning and the end of those days, that's when the shadows are best for capturing. Event intervals are another beast, and really it all comes down to determining how long the event's going to be. So this is where you actually need to do some research. Let's just say, for instance, if an event lasts for 2 hours and you want to capture 800 frames, your interval is going to be 9 seconds. And that's important because you want to be able to make sure that you capture a beginning and an end, what we call leaders and headers. And that way what happens is you can condense that later on in post, but you also don't want to miss the action that's happening in between. So always make sure that you add some extra frames in between there, add some extra time. If you think that the event's going to take 2 hours, plan for 3, and then just add more frames in between that. That way you can cut it in post and get exactly what you need right in the center. As a pro tip, I highly recommend downloading a time-lapse calculator. They're very easy. Most of them are free, and what you can do is you can actually put in, what your interval is going to be, how many shots you want to do, and then it's going to tell you how long the time is going to be, or vice versa. You can put in how long the time is going to be, how many shots you want, and then it's going to tell you what your interval is. So I really recommend getting one because it helps a great deal, especially when you're out in the field. When it comes to plants, it's all trial and error. There are no set intervals for this. It's something that you're going to have to learn, how long the plant takes to germinate or how long the cycle is going to be, and then you're going to have to determine the interval yourself. So that's why, again, plants are probably the most difficult things to time-lapse. With all this information now, one of the best tips I can offer is that when you're planning to shoot your time lapse, see if you can incorporate at least 2 or 3 of those elements in each shot. When we get to the post-production phase, I'll show you how you can add motion to the shot without the need of a motion control slider. Thanks for joining me in this chapter. I'll see you in the next lesson.